Dr. Lisa Carter checked her medical supplies one more time before the sun came up. The camp was quiet, except for the soft breathing of sleeping refugees in the nearby tents. She had been working on the border world of Kepler 442b for 3 weeks now, and every morning brought new challenges. The medical outpost was small, but well-equipped, designed to help the thousands of people fleeing the war between two massive alien governments. Lisa loved her job. As the chief medical officer aboard the exploration vessel Horizon Dawn, she had treated many different alien species. She had fixed broken bones on tall blue Zephyrians, helped injured insect-like Keltons, and even performed surgery on beings made of living crystal. Her medical bag contained tools for dozens of different body types. She believed that healing had no boundaries between species. The mission to this world was supposed to be simple. Commander Jake Morrison had chosen a small team to build the medical station. Besides Lisa, there was Amy Rodriguez, who handled all communications, Pete Johnson, who fixed their equipment, 2 security officers named Danny Walsh and Kevin Brooks, and Dr. Helen Martinez, who studied alien biology. They were all good people who wanted to help. Lisa walked over to the communication tent, where Amy was already awake, checking the morning reports. Amy was young but skilled, and she could speak several alien languages fluently. She smiled when she saw Lisa approaching. "Good morning, Doc," Amy said softly. "The refugee ships are running late today. Storm in the upper atmosphere." Lisa nodded and poured herself some coffee from their small heating unit. The hot drink felt good in the cool morning air. Pete Johnson emerged from the equipment shelter, wiping grease from his hands. He was always working on something, making sure their generators and medical devices ran smoothly. "Morning, Lisa," Pete said. "I've got the new scanner working perfectly. Should make your job easier today." Danny Walsh and Kevin Brooks were already at their posts, checking the perimeter. Both men were experienced soldiers who had volunteered for peaceful missions after years of war. They carried weapons but hoped never to use them. Their job was to keep everyone safe while Lisa and her team helped the refugees. Dr. Helen Martinez was still in her laboratory tent, probably studying samples from the local wildlife. She was fascinated by how life adapted to different worlds. Helen often worked late into the night and woke up early to continue her research. Lisa admired her dedication. The camp was set up in a valley surrounded by purple grass and strange trees that grew in spirals. The alien plants were beautiful but harmless. The refugees who came here were mostly families with children, running from battles they never wanted to fight. Lisa had treated everything from minor cuts to serious injuries caused by energy weapons. As the sun climbed higher, Lisa prepared for another busy day. She organized her medical supplies and made sure the treatment area was clean and ready. The refugees would start arriving soon, and many would need medical attention. Some came with old wounds that had never healed properly. Others were sick from the stress of constant travel. Amy was monitoring the communication channels when she suddenly went very still. Lisa looked over and saw Amy's face go pale. Amy quickly put on her headphones and started typing on her keyboard. "What is it?" Lisa asked, moving closer. "I'm picking up movement," Amy whispered. "Multiple ships coming fast. They're not refugee vessels." Pete immediately stopped his work and joined them. Danny and Kevin appeared at the tent entrance, their weapons already in hand. Helen emerged from her laboratory, looking confused by the sudden tension. "Can you identify them?" Jake Morrison asked as he rushed into the communication tent. Amy's fingers flew over her controls. They're Krillian ships. Raiders. 3 vessels, heavily armed. Lisa felt her heart sink. The Krillians were known throughout the galaxy for their cruelty. They were insect-like creatures with 6 arms and no mercy. They attacked settlements, took prisoners, and sold them as slaves. Worse, They were known to experiment on other species, trying to create biological weapons. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "Maybe 10 minutes," Amy replied, her voice shaking slightly. Jake immediately started giving orders. "Danny, Kevin, defensive positions. Pete, shut down everything that might be valuable to them. Helen, destroy your research samples. Amy, send a distress signal now." Lisa began packing her most important medical supplies. If they were captured, she might be the only one who could help injured teammates. She grabbed basic surgical tools, emergency medications, and healing compounds that worked on multiple species. The attack came faster than expected. The Krillian ships appeared over the valley like dark clouds, their weapons already charging. Lisa could see them through the tent opening, sleek, biometallic vessels that seemed to pulse with their own evil life. Amy managed to send one distress signal before the first energy blast hit the communication equipment. Sparks flew everywhere. As their main antenna exploded, Pete ran toward the power generators, trying to shut them down before the Krillians could capture them intact. Danny and Kevin opened fire on the landing craft, their weapons flashing in the morning light. But the Krillians had energy shields and superior numbers. Within minutes, the camp was surrounded by chittering, six-limbed creatures wielding strange weapons that fired paralyzing darts. Lisa watched in horror as Danny fell first, his body convulsing, as alien toxins shut down his nervous system. Kevin managed to take down 2 attackers before a Krillian warrior's claws raked across his chest. He collapsed, bleeding but still alive. Pete was captured while trying to destroy the equipment. 3 Krillians surrounded him, their mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Helen screamed as more attackers burst into her laboratory, destroying years of research in seconds. Amy tried to run toward the medical tent, probably hoping to help Lisa, but a Krillian warrior caught her easily. Lisa heard Amy scream as alien. Claws tore through her jacket and into her back. Lisa herself was treating a wounded refugee child when the attack began. She threw herself over the small alien, trying to protect the helpless being from the violence. A Krillian warrior approached, its compound eyes reflecting the morning light. Lisa looked up at the creature, seeing no mercy in its inhuman face. "Please," she said, still covering the child. "We're medical personnel. We help people." The Krillian warrior tilted its head, studying her. Then it raised some kind of neural disruptor and fired. Lisa felt electricity race through her body, and everything went dark. When she woke up, Lisa found herself in a strange cell made of biometallic walls. Through the translucent barriers, she could see her team members in similar prisons. They were all alive but hurt. Amy was unconscious, blood seeping through bandages on her back. Pete had bruises covering his face. Danny and Kevin were barely moving, still affected by the paralyzing toxins. Helen was in the cell next to hers, and Lisa could see that her friend was terrified. Helen had always been gentle, more comfortable with plants and small animals than violence. Now she was trapped by creatures who saw other beings as nothing more than test subjects. Lisa realized they were no longer on the planet. The walls moved slightly, and she could feel the subtle vibration of a ship's engines. The Krillians had taken them somewhere, and Lisa had a terrible feeling about what came next. She had heard stories about Krillian prison ships, places where they conducted horrible experiments on captured beings. The insect-like aliens were always trying to create new biological weapons, and they needed test subjects from different species to perfect their designs. Looking at her injured team, Lisa felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. These creatures had made a terrible mistake. They thought they had captured a simple medical team, easy victims for their experiments. They had no idea that Lisa Carter was not just any medic. She was a healer who had seen war, who had made hard choices. And who would do anything to protect the people under her care? The Krillians were about to learn what a human medic really was. The first day in the Krillian prison ship was the worst day of Lisa's life. She woke up in the biometallic cell with her head pounding and her body aching from the neural disruptor. The walls around her were smooth and slightly warm, like living tissue. Through the transparent barriers, she could see her team members in cells nearby, all of them hurt and scared. Amy was awake, but not talking. The communication specialist sat in the corner of her cell, staring at nothing. The wounds on her back had been treated with some kind of alien medical foam, but Lisa could tell they were still painful. Every few minutes, Amy would wince and touch her shoulder. Pete looked angry rather than scared. The engineer was examining his cell walls, probably trying to find a way to escape. His face was swollen from the beating he had taken during capture, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Lisa knew he was already planning something. Danny and Kevin were in worse condition. Both security officers were still weak from the paralyzing toxins. Danny could barely sit up, and Kevin kept trying to move, his arms but failing. Lisa wished she could examine them properly, but the cells were separate, and she had no medical equipment. Helen was the one who worried Lisa most. The xenobiologist was brilliant and kind, but she had never experienced real violence before. Helen sat hunched in her cell, arms wrapped around her knees, shaking slightly. Lisa could see that her friend was in shock. The Krillians came for Helen first. Two of the insect-like creatures entered the cell block, their 6 arms moving in complex patterns as they communicated with each other. They wore no clothes, their chitinous bodies covered in natural armor. Their compound eyes reflected the strange light of the ship, making them look even more alien and frightening. One of them operated a control panel, and Helen's cell wall became permeable. The xenobiologist tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. The Krillians grabbed her with their middle arms and dragged her out of the cell. Helen looked back at Lisa with terrified eyes. "Please," Helen whispered. "I haven't done anything wrong." The Krillians ignored her completely. They carried Helen away down a corridor that glowed with bioluminescent strips. Lisa pressed her hands against her cell wall, trying to follow, but the barrier was solid and unbreakable. For hours, Lisa could hear Helen screaming somewhere in the ship. The sounds echoed through the corridors, a mixture of pain and terror that made Lisa's heart race. She paced her small cell, trying to think of something, anything she could do to help her friend. When the Krillians brought Helen back, she was different. The xenobiologist's eyes were wide and unfocused, and she moved like someone in a dream. Strange marks covered her arms and neck, small puncture wounds that leaked clear fluid. Lisa realized they had been using neural probes on her friend, digging into her memories and knowledge. "Helen," Lisa called softly. "Helen, can you hear me?" Helen looked toward Lisa's voice, but didn't seem to recognize her. She sat down heavily in her cell and started rocking back and forth. Lisa felt rage building in her chest, a cold anger that was different from anything she had felt before. The next day, they came for Amy. The communication specialist was still weak from her injuries, but she fought them anyway. Amy kicked and struggled as the Krillians dragged her away, shouting curse words in 3 different languages. Lisa was proud of her friend's courage, even as her heart broke. Amy's screams were different from Helen's. Where Helen had cried out in pain and confusion, Amy fought back with anger. Lisa could hear her friend yelling threats and insults at their captors, her voice echoing through the ship's corridors. The Krillians were obviously frustrated by Amy's resistance. When they brought Amy back, she was barely conscious. The young woman's head lolled to one side, and her eyes were bloodshot. But when she saw Lisa watching, Amy managed to focus and mouth a single word: fight. On the 3rd day, the Krillians took Pete, The engineer had been ready for them, and he put up the best fight any of them had managed. Pete was strong and clever, and he managed to break free twice before they subdued him with more neural disruptors. Lisa watched helplessly as her friend was dragged away, his body convulsing from the electrical assault. Pete came back different. 2. The engineer, who had always been quick with jokes and solutions, now sat silently in his cell, staring at his hands. Lisa could see that they had attached some kind of device to his head, probably extracting his technical knowledge directly from his brain. Danny and Kevin were taken together on the 4th day. Both security officers were still weak, but they supported each other as the Krillians led them away. Lisa heard the sounds of a struggle, then silence. When her friends returned, they were covered in new wounds and moved like old men. Lisa began to understand what was happening. The Krillians weren't just torturing them for pleasure. They were conducting systematic experiments, studying human biology and extracting knowledge. They wanted to know how humans worked, how they thought, how they could be broken, but they had made a critical error. They assumed that Lisa was just a simple medic, someone who would cooperate once her friends were hurt. They brought her food and water, kept her cell clean, and left her alone while they tortured the others. They thought she was too soft and caring to be a threat. Lisa let them believe that. She sat quietly in her cell, appearing to be a broken healer who was losing hope. When the Krillians looked at her, she made sure her face showed fear and despair. She wanted them to think she was defeated, but inside, Lisa was changing. Every scream from her teammates fed the cold anger growing in her chest. Every time she saw Helen's vacant stare or Amy's pain-filled eyes, Lisa felt something hard and sharp forming in her mind. She started to remember things she had tried to forget. The Titan Wars, where she had served as a battlefield medic. Horrible injuries she had seen. The impossible surgeries she had performed while explosions shook the ground. The friends she had lost. The hard choices she had made. Lisa had sworn an oath to heal, to preserve life, to do no harm. But she had also sworn to protect those under her care. As she watched her team suffer, she began to understand that sometimes protection required violence. The Krillians came to her cell on the 5th day. 2 of them stood outside her barrier, their compound eyes studying her carefully. One of them activated a translation device, and when it spoke, its voice was like rustling leaves. "You are the medical specialist," it said. "You will help us understand human biology." Lisa looked up at the creature, making sure her face showed the right mixture of fear and resignation. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," the Krillian replied. "How humans heal, how they break, how they die. You will teach us, or your companions will suffer more." Lisa nodded slowly, as if she was giving up hope. "I'll help you. Just please, don't hurt them anymore." The Krillians seemed satisfied by her surrender. They deactivated her cell barrier and escorted her to a medical laboratory somewhere in the ship. The room was filled with strange equipment and specimens from dozens of different species. Lisa saw parts of beings she recognized and others that were completely alien. "You will work here," the Krillian said, gesturing to a workstation. "You will tell us about human anatomy, human weaknesses, human fears. If you lie or refuse, your friends will pay." Lisa sat down at the workstation and began to examine the equipment. It was sophisticated technology, designed for biological research and experimentation. She recognized some of the tools from her own medical training, while others were completely alien in design. "What specifically do you want to know?" she asked. "Human pain tolerance," the Krillian replied. "Recovery rates. Psychological breaking points. We are developing new interrogation techniques." Lisa felt sick, but kept her face neutral. "I can help with that, but I'll need to examine my teammates to give you accurate information." The Krillian considered this. You may observe their treatments, but if you try to help them, they will suffer worse. Lisa nodded, hiding her satisfaction. They were giving her exactly what she needed: access to her team and to their medical facilities. The Krillians thought they were using her expertise against her own species. They had no idea that Lisa was already planning their destruction. As she began her work, Lisa started to study her captors as carefully as they were studying her. She watched how they moved, how they breathed, how their biological systems functioned. She memorized their equipment, their procedures, their weaknesses. The Krillians had made a fatal mistake. They thought they had captured a simple healer, someone who would cooperate to save her friends. They didn't understand that Lisa Carter was not just any medic. She was a warrior who had learned to fight with scalpels and medicines. Instead of guns and bombs. Lisa looked at her teammates through the laboratory's viewing window. Amy was sitting up straighter. Danny and Kevin were moving more normally, and even Helen seemed a little more aware. They were all strong people, and they were surviving. But Lisa was going to do more than just survive. She was going to make sure the Krillians learned exactly what a human medic really was. She was going to turn their own laboratory into a weapon, their own research into their destruction. The Krillians wanted to know about human biology. Lisa was going to teach them everything they needed to know, starting with how easily their own bodies could be broken. Lisa spent her first week in the Krillian laboratory, learning everything she could about her captors. She pretended to be a broken healer who was only helping them to protect her friends. But inside, she was gathering intelligence like a spy. Every conversation, every observation, every detail about their biology went into her memory. The Krillians were fascinating from a medical perspective. Their bodies were built like living machines, with redundant systems and backup organs. They had 2 hearts, one primary and one secondary. Their nervous system was distributed throughout their bodies instead of centralized in a brain. Most importantly, they had a unique respiratory system that required precise gas mixtures to function properly. Dr. Vex Grin was the lead researcher, a particularly large Krillian with scarred chitin and 6 perfectly functional arms. He supervised Lisa's work closely, always watching for signs of deception. Lisa made sure to appear cooperative and defeated, answering his questions about human anatomy with careful accuracy. "Your species is remarkably resilient," Vex Grin said one day, his translation device making his clicks and chirps understandable. "Most beings would have died from the treatments we have given your companions." Lisa looked at her friends through the laboratory window. Amy was being subjected to memory extraction again, neural probes digging into her mind to steal her communication skills. Pete was strapped to a table while they tested human pain responses. Danny and Kevin were being used to study human combat instincts. "We're built to survive," Lisa said, keeping her voice steady. "Evolution made us tough." "Yes," Vex Grin agreed. "This is why we need your knowledge. Human warriors are becoming a problem in the war. We need better ways to defeat them." Lisa nodded as if she understood, but inside she was memorizing every detail of the laboratory. She noted the locations of chemical storage areas, the ventilation systems, the security protocols. She watched how the Krillians moved and worked, studying their habits and routines. The breakthrough came when Lisa realized the Krillians' greatest weakness. Their warrior caste was genetically modified to be fearless and aggressive, but this came at a terrible cost. Their modified adrenal system was hypersensitive to certain compounds, and their specialized respiratory system required exact atmospheric conditions. During her supervised research, Lisa discovered that common medical chemicals could be combined to create a compound that would be lethal to Krillians but harmless to other species. The irony was perfect. She could use healing supplies to bring death to those who tortured healers. Lisa began her preparations slowly and carefully. During her daily work, she would pocket small amounts of antiseptic solutions, anesthetic compounds, and medical solvents. To the Krillians, she appeared to be doing routine maintenance on equipment, but she was actually gathering the components for her weapon. The hardest part was hiding her activities from the constant surveillance. Krillian security cameras watched every corner of the laboratory, and guards checked on her regularly. Lisa had to be clever about when and how she collected her supplies, always appearing to be following normal medical procedures. She stored her gathered chemicals in a hidden compartment she had discovered in her workstation. The space was meant for equipment storage, but Lisa used it to build her arsenal. Each component was carefully measured and tested, using the Krillian's own equipment to verify her calculations. Lisa also began studying the ship's life support systems. As a medic, she was allowed to examine the air filtration and water purification systems to ensure they were safe for human prisoners. The Krillians saw this as normal medical caution, but Lisa was actually mapping the ship's critical infrastructure. The ship's ventilation system was particularly interesting. It was designed to maintain the exact atmospheric conditions that Krillians needed to survive. Lisa realized she could use this system to distribute her weapon throughout the entire vessel, turning the ship's own life support into a delivery system for death. She also began paying attention to the ship's medical bay, where injured Krillians were treated. Lisa volunteered to help with medical procedures, claiming she wanted to learn about alien biology to better serve her captors. The Krillians were pleased by her apparent cooperation and gave her increasing access to their medical facilities. During these sessions, Lisa learned about Krillian physiology in incredible detail. She studied their organ systems, their blood chemistry, their metabolic processes. She watched their medical procedures and learned how their bodies responded to different treatments. All of this information went into her growing understanding of how to kill them efficiently. The Krillians' medical equipment was sophisticated, but not designed for the compound Lisa was creating. She realized she could modify their devices to produce and distribute her weapon, turning their own medical bay into a factory for their destruction. Lisa also spent time observing the ship's crew routines. She memorized guard rotations, sleep cycles, and work schedules. She noted which areas of the ship were most heavily monitored and which were relatively unguarded. She studied the locations of critical systems and emergency equipment. Most importantly, Lisa began planning her rescue operation. She couldn't save her friends by simply killing the Krillians. She needed to take control of the ship and get them medical attention. This meant she needed to eliminate the crew systematically while keeping essential systems operational. The plan that emerged was complex but elegant. Lisa would contaminate the ship's air supply with her compound, causing respiratory distress throughout the vessel. While the Krillians were dying, she would move through the ship, finishing off survivors and taking control of critical systems. She would then free her team and provide medical treatment before help arrived. The timing had to be perfect. Lisa needed to deploy her weapon during the ship's night cycle when most of the crew was sleeping. She would have perhaps 6 hours to complete her mission before the next shift change. Any delay would mean discovery and failure. Lisa spent days refining her compound, testing different combinations and concentrations. She used tissue samples from medical procedures to verify the weapon's effectiveness against Krillian biology. She also tested it on samples from other species to ensure it would be harmless to her friends. The weapon was beautiful in its simplicity. It targeted the Krillians' modified respiratory system, causing their specialized organs to shut down. The effect was rapid, but not instantaneous, giving Lisa time to move through the ship while her enemies died slowly and painfully. She also prepared backup plans. If the airborne compound failed, Lisa had created concentrated doses that could be injected directly. If the main laboratory was discovered, she had hidden supplies throughout the ship. If she was captured, she had taught herself to create the weapon from common cleaning supplies. Lisa's greatest challenge was maintaining her cover while preparing for war. She had to appear broken and cooperative while secretly planning mass murder. She had to hide her growing confidence and determination behind a mask of despair and submission. The Krillians never suspected her true intentions. They saw a defeated healer who was helping them reluctantly, driven only by concern for her friends. They had no idea that Lisa Carter was not just any medic. She was a warrior who had learned to fight with chemistry and biology instead of bullets and bombs. As Lisa made her final preparations, she thought about the oath she had sworn as a doctor. First, do no harm was the foundation of medical ethics. But she had come to understand that sometimes the greatest good required harming those who would harm others. The Krillians had tortured her team, violated their minds, and used them as test subjects. They planned to use the knowledge they gained to hurt more humans, to develop better ways to break and kill her people. Lisa could not allow that to happen. She looked at her friends through the laboratory window one last time. Amy was unconscious. Again, exhausted from another session of memory extraction. Pete was barely moving, his mind damaged by neural probes. Danny and Kevin were covered in new wounds from biological experiments. Helen was staring at nothing, her brilliant mind fractured by alien intrusion. Lisa felt the cold anger in her chest crystallize into something harder and sharper. She had been a healer all her life, dedicated to preserving life and reducing suffering. But these creatures had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. They had taken people under her care and tortured them for knowledge. Tomorrow night, during the ship's sleep cycle, Lisa would begin her war. She would turn the Krillians' own medical bay into a weapon factory, their own air supply into a delivery system for death. She would move through their ship like a ghost, carrying nothing but a medical bag filled with precisely crafted destruction. The Krillians wanted to know what a human medic really was. Lisa was going to show them exactly what they had captured, not a simple healer, but a guardian of life who would become an angel of death to protect those who could not protect themselves. She had learned their biology, studied their weaknesses, and prepared her weapons. Now it was time to teach them the most important lesson of all, that sometimes the most merciful thing a doctor can do is ensure that torturers never have the chance to torture again. Lisa waited until the ship's night cycle began before starting her war. The Krillian vessel operated on a 26-hour schedule, with 8 hours designated for crew rest. During this time, only essential personnel remained on duty, and most of the ship's corridors were dimly lit by bioluminescent strips. She had been preparing for this moment for 2 weeks, gathering supplies and studying her enemies. Now, as she sat in the medical laboratory with her carefully crafted weapon, Lisa felt a strange calmness settle over her. She was no longer Dr. Lisa Carter, the healer who had sworn to do no harm. She was something else now, something harder and more dangerous. The compound she had created was stored in a modified medical nebulizer, designed to distribute the chemical through the ship's air circulation system. Lisa had tested it extensively on tissue samples and was confident it would work exactly as planned. The weapon would target the Krillians' hypersensitive respiratory system, causing organ failure within hours. Lisa connected the nebulizer to the laboratory's ventilation intake and activated it. The device hummed quietly as it began dispersing her compound throughout the ship. She had calculated the distribution time carefully. It would take 47 minutes for the chemical to reach every section of the vessel. While she waited, Lisa prepared for the next phase of her plan. She filled her medical bag with concentrated doses of the compound, each one capable of killing a Krillian within minutes. She also packed basic medical supplies she would need to treat her friends once she freed them. The first signs of her weapon's effectiveness appeared after 30 minutes. Through the laboratory's internal communication system, Lisa could hear Reports of respiratory distress among the crew. The Krillians were describing symptoms that matched her calculations perfectly: difficulty breathing, chest pain, and systemic organ dysfunction. Lisa watched the laboratory's monitoring screens. As panic spread through the ship, the Krillians' medical team was trying to understand what was happening, but they had no experience with this type of compound. Their doctors were designed to treat injuries and diseases, not chemical warfare. At exactly 47 minutes, Lisa left the laboratory and began her journey through the ship. She had memorized every corridor, every guard post, every critical system during her weeks of captivity. Now she moved through the vessel like a ghost, her soft medical shoes silent on the biometallic floors. The first guard she encountered was already dying. The Krillian warrior was leaning against a wall, his compound eyes dim and unfocused. His breathing was labored, and clear fluid leaked from his respiratory organs. Lisa approached him calmly and injected a concentrated dose of her compound directly into his secondary heart. The guard collapsed within seconds. Lisa continued through the ship, following the route she had planned. The corridors were filled with the sounds of dying Krillians, clicking mandibles, scraping claws, and the wet gurgling of failing respiratory systems. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls, making the ship feel like a nightmare made real. She reached the security station next, where 3 guards were struggling to coordinate a response to the medical emergency. One of them was already unconscious, while the other 2 were trying to operate communication equipment with shaking hands. Lisa entered the room quietly and eliminated both survivors with precise injections. The ship's medical bay was her next target. Lisa found 6 Krillian doctors working frantically to develop a treatment for the mysterious illness killing their crew. They were so focused on their work that they didn't notice her approach. Lisa moved through the room systematically, ending their lives with clinical efficiency. With the medical team eliminated, Lisa began sabotaging their equipment. She contaminated their supply of antidotes and destroyed their research on human biology. She wanted to ensure that even if some Krillians survived, they would never be able to use what they had learned from torturing her friends. The ship's bridge was heavily guarded, but Lisa's compound had done most of the work for her. She found the command crew in various stages of dying, their bodies convulsing as their modified organs failed. The ship's captain was still alive, but barely conscious when Lisa arrived. "You," he gasped, recognizing her through his failing vision. "The human medic. What have you done?" Lisa looked down at the dying alien commander with cold satisfaction. "I've given you exactly what you gave my friends. The only difference is that my treatment is permanent." She injected the captain with her compound and watched him die. Then she began the process of taking control of the ship's navigation and communication systems. Lisa needed to pilot the vessel back to human space and send a distress signal to rescue her team. The engineering section was next, where Lisa found the crew struggling to maintain life support systems. They were trying to filter out her compound, but their equipment wasn't designed for this type of contamination. Lisa eliminated the surviving engineers and began shutting down non-essential systems to conserve power. Throughout the ship, Lisa encountered small groups of Krillians who had barricaded themselves in secure areas. They were trying to wait out the chemical attack, hoping their sealed environments would protect them. Lisa dealt with these survivors methodically, using her knowledge of the ship's layout to find them all. Some of the Krillians tried to fight back, but they were weakened by her compound and no match for her determination. Lisa had become something they couldn't understand, a healer who had learned to kill with the same precision. She had once used to save lives. The ship's detention area was heavily secured, but Lisa had studied the access codes during her time in the laboratory. She found her friends in their cells, all of them in terrible condition, but still alive. Amy was unconscious, her face pale and drawn. Pete was awake, but barely responsive, his mind damaged by neural probes. Danny and Kevin were covered in wounds from biological experiments. Helen was the worst, her brilliant mind fractured by weeks of mental torture. Lisa began treating her friends immediately, using supplies she had gathered from the ship's medical bay. She started with Amy, administering stimulants and neural repair compounds. The communications specialist stirred and opened her eyes, focusing on Lisa with difficulty. "Doc?" Amy whispered. "What happened? Where are the guards?" "They're dead," Lisa said simply, continuing to work on Amy's injuries. "All of them." Amy's eyes widened as she realized what Lisa meant. "You killed them? The entire crew?" Lisa nodded as she moved to treat Pete. "They tortured you. They tortured all of you. I made sure they'll never do it again." Pete was more difficult to treat because of the neural damage, but Lisa had experience with brain injuries from her time in the war. She administered carefully measured doses of neural regeneration compounds and monitored his vital signs closely. Danny and Kevin were easier to help because their injuries were mostly physical. Lisa cleaned their wounds, administered pain medication, and began the process of repairing damaged tissue. Both men were tough and would recover given time and proper treatment. Helen required the most delicate care. The xenobiologist's mind had been invaded repeatedly, and her memories were fragmented. Lisa used a combination of neural stabilizers and psychological support medications to help her friend regain some coherence. As she worked, Lisa explained what she had done. She told her friends about the compound she had created, about her systematic elimination of the Krillian crew, about her plans to return them to human space. She spoke in the same calm, clinical tone she had always used when discussing medical procedures. Her friends listened in stunned silence. They had known Lisa as a gentle healer, someone who dedicated her life to saving others. The idea that she had become a killer was difficult to accept, but they had all seen what the Krillians were capable of doing. "You did what you had to do," Danny said quietly, his voice hoarse from screaming. "They would have killed us eventually, after they learned everything they wanted to know." Kevin nodded agreement. "Those things weren't just studying us. They were planning to use what they learned to hurt more humans. You stopped them." Amy was the most shaken by Lisa's transformation. "But you're a doctor," she said. "You took an oath to heal people, not kill them." Lisa looked at her friend with sad but determined eyes. "I took an oath to protect people too. Sometimes those oaths conflict, and you have to choose which one matters more." Lisa continued treating her friends while the ship drifted through space. She had programmed the navigation system to return to human territory, but the journey would take several days. During that time, she needed to keep her team alive and help them recover from their ordeal. The ship felt different now that the Krillians were gone. The corridors were silent, except for the hum of life support systems. The bioluminescent strips still glowed, but they no longer seemed threatening. Lisa had turned the vessel from a prison into a sanctuary. She spent the next few hours disposing of the Krillian bodies. This was necessary, both for sanitation and to prevent her friends from seeing the full extent of what she had done. Lisa worked methodically, using the ship's waste disposal systems to eliminate the evidence of her war. The ship's medical bay became her base of operations. Lisa had access to sophisticated alien medical equipment, and she used it to provide the best possible care for her friends. She performed Sue. The rescue ships arrived at the human military base on Titan Station 3 days after picking up Lisa and her team. The medical facility there was one of the best in human space, equipped to handle the most complex injuries and psychological trauma. Lisa insisted on staying with her friends during their treatment. Even though she was officially a patient herself, Commander Jake Morrison met them at the medical bay. He had been searching for his team since receiving Amy's distress. Signal weeks earlier. When he saw Lisa walking beside the stretchers carrying her friends, his face showed a mixture of relief and amazement. "Dr. Carter," he said, approaching her carefully. "The preliminary reports are incredible. You eliminated an entire Krillian crew?" Lisa nodded, her expression calm but tired. "They were torturing my team and planning to use what they learned to develop biological weapons against humans. I couldn't let that happen." Jake studied her face, seeing something different in her eyes. The gentle healer he had known was still there, but there was also something harder and more dangerous. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Lisa said automatically, then paused. "Actually, that's not true. I'm changed. I did things I never thought I would do, but I don't regret them. My friends are alive, and the Krillians can't hurt anyone else." The investigation that followed was thorough and classified. Military intelligence. Officers interviewed Lisa and her team extensively, documenting every detail of their capture, torture, and escape. They were particularly interested in Lisa's weapon and her methods of eliminating the Krillian crew. Dr. Patricia Wells, the head of military medical research, spent hours with Lisa reviewing the compound she had created. "This is remarkable work," she said, studying the chemical analysis. "You developed a species-specific bioweapon using only basic medical supplies." Lisa felt uncomfortable being praised for creating a weapon. "I just used what I knew about biology. Any medic with battlefield experience could have done the same thing." "No," Dr. Wells said firmly. "This required not just medical knowledge, but strategic thinking, psychological resilience, and precise execution under extreme stress. You're not just any medic, Dr. Carter." The debriefing sessions were difficult for Lisa's friends. Amy struggled with memory gaps from the neural extractions. Pete had headaches and concentration problems from the brain probes. Danny and Kevin were healing well physically, but had nightmares about their torture. Helen was the most affected, her brilliant mind still fragmented from the mental invasions. Lisa worked with the medical team to help her friends recover. She used her knowledge of their personalities and medical histories to develop personalized treatment plans. She also provided emotional support, helping them process the trauma they had experienced. The story of what happened began to spread despite the classification. Military personnel talked to their friends, who told their families, who shared the story with others. Within weeks, every human colony had heard whispers about the medic who had destroyed an entire Krillian crew to save her team. The Krillians themselves were the ones who made the story famous. Intelligence intercepts revealed that they had issued warnings throughout their fleet about human medical personnel. They described Lisa as a dangerous warrior disguised as a healer, capable of turning any medical facility into a weapon. The alien perspective on the incident was particularly interesting. The Krillians had always viewed humans as inferior beings, useful only as slaves or test subjects. The idea that a single human medic could eliminate an entire crew was so shocking that it changed their entire approach to dealing with human prisoners. Captain Sarah Blake, who had commanded the rescue mission, was assigned to write the official report. She interviewed Lisa extensively, trying to understand how a peaceful healer had become such an effective killer. "You showed incredible restraint," she told Lisa during one of their sessions. "You could have simply poisoned the entire crew at once, but you chose to eliminate them individually." "Why?" Lisa thought carefully before answering. "I needed to make sure I could control the ship and treat my friends. Mass killing would have been easier, but it might have damaged critical systems. I also wanted to be certain that every Krillian was dead. I couldn't risk any of them surviving to hurt more people." "But you're a doctor," Captain Blake said. "Doesn't it conflict with your oath to heal?" Lisa's answer became famous throughout human space. "I took an oath to preserve life and do no harm. But I also swore to protect those under my care." When those oaths conflict, you have to choose which one serves the greater good. The Krillians had to die so that others could live. The military began studying Lisa's methods and incorporating them into medic training. They developed new protocols for medical personnel operating in hostile environments, emphasizing the dual nature of medical knowledge. The program was unofficially called Carter Doctrine in honor of Lisa's actions. Lisa herself was offered promotions and commendations, but she declined them all. She wanted to return to her regular duties as a healer, not become a professional warrior. However, she did agree to teach classes on battlefield, medicine, and biological warfare defense. Her friends gradually returned to active duty as they recovered. Amy became a specialist in counter-interrogation techniques, helping develop methods to resist neural extraction. Pete designed new security systems based on his experience as a prisoner. Danny and Kevin joined special forces units that specialized in rescuing hostages from alien captors. Helen's recovery was the most remarkable. The xenobiologist not only regained her memories, but developed new insights into alien psychology and biology. She became a leading expert on Krillian society and helped design better defenses against their tactics. The incident report, though classified, became required reading at every military medical school. Young medics studied Lisa's actions as an example of how medical knowledge could be used for protection as well as healing. They learned that sometimes the most merciful thing a doctor could do was to ensure that torturers never had the chance to torture again. Lisa continued her work aboard the Horizon Dawn, but she was different now. She still treated alien patients with the same skill and compassion as before, but there was a new awareness in her eyes. She had learned that the galaxy was full of beings who would exploit kindness and mercy, and that sometimes force was the only language they understood. Her reputation spread beyond human space. Other species began to view human medics with a new respect, understanding that these healers were also capable of being warriors when necessary. The story of Lisa Carter became a legend that crossed species boundaries, a reminder that humans were not the weak, emotional beings that many aliens believed them to be. Years later, when the war between the hegemony and the Free Worlds Alliance finally ended, historians would point to Lisa's actions as a turning point. Her elimination of the Krillian research team had prevented the development of biological weapons that could have killed millions. Her compound was reverse-engineered and used to develop defenses against Krillian bioweapons. Lisa never spoke publicly about what she had done, preferring to let her actions speak for themselves. But privately, she was satisfied with the choice she had made. She had saved her friends, protected innocent people, and shown the galaxy that humans would not be victims. The gentle healer who had been captured by the Krillians was gone forever, replaced by someone who understood that healing and harming were two sides of the same coin. Lisa had learned that medical knowledge was power, and that power carried the responsibility to use it wisely. When new medics took their oaths, they would hear the story of Dr. Lisa Carter. They would learn that medicine was not just about healing individual patients, but about protecting the innocent from those who would harm them. They would understand that sometimes the greatest act of mercy was to ensure that evil could never triumph. The story became a cornerstone of human medical education, a reminder that the knowledge to save lives could also be used to end them. It taught young healers that they were not just doctors, but guardians of life, who would become angels of death when necessary to protect those who could not protect themselves. In the end, the Krillians had learned exactly what a human medic really was, not just a healer, but a warrior who fought with chemistry and biology instead of guns and bombs. They had discovered that humans were capable of incredible compassion, but also of cold, calculated vengeance when those they protected were threatened. Lisa Carter had become a legend, a symbol of human determination and the lengths that good people would go to protect the innocent. Her story would be told for generations, a reminder that in a dangerous galaxy, even healers must sometimes become warriors to preserve the peace.